Hello, Frizzle Fantastics. I gave 46 books 5 stars this year. That number is way higher than I was expecting. That is 22% of my reading I am giving 5 stars. I am shocked and amazed at this number. And we are going to talk about all of them. Just kidding. Because of those 46 books that I gave 5 stars, 20 of them were rereads. So we're not going to talk about those. So we have 26 5-star books left. But then once I collapse those into groups of series, it makes a top 10. It makes a top 10! It's perfect! So we're going to talk about my top 10 books and series of 2022. Part of my heart says that these books all tie for first place and there isn't a clear winner. But that's a lie because the other part of my heart says there is a clear winner. But I'm not going to tell you what it is until the end. So you get to guess throughout the video, how would Chloe rank these? The order that I'm going to be talking about the books in is chronologically by publication date. So we're going to be starting with the books that were published decades ago and I just read for the first time in 2022 and working our way through the ages to books that were actually published this year. Starting with a series that was first published in 1986, we have the 𝐂𝐿𝐍𝐻𝐄𝐑 series. This is a science fiction series that follows the 𝐂𝐿𝐍𝐻𝐄𝐑 family. Most of the book centering on the character Miles 𝐂𝐿𝐍𝐻𝐄𝐑, but some on his other relatives. And this is a series that is dancing with a lot of big ideas and different genre expectations. Miles 𝐂𝐿𝐍𝐻𝐄𝐑 is not your typical 1980s sci-fi protagonist. He is physically crippled and mentally adventurous, manic, obsessive, egotistical. And he dreams of earning the respect of his homeworld and his peers that is highly militaristic. He wants to become a military man and make a name for himself that way, and he keeps finding roadblocks from the prejudice and ableism of his culture. But he's really good at going around and jumping over these kind of hurdles and gets himself into the most sticky, ridiculous messes along the way. One of the things that I really admire about this series, and another reason why I can't wait to read the rest of them, because I've only read 12 of the books so far, but one of the things that I love about the ones so far is the slow transformation of genre ongoing in this series. Some of the books are like space pirate adventure, and then slowly the series is transforming until you get to a book that's like a triple romance comedy of manners plot with no action at all, and somehow I gave both of these 5 stars and 5 stars along every single point of the transition there. Because every step of the transition makes sense as we're following the character development of Miles 𝐂𝐿𝐍𝐻𝐄𝐑. I love these books, I'm obsessed with these books, highly recommended. And I will link videos of me talking about these books along with pretty much every single book in this video in the footnotes. Next up on our list, we are going to a book published in 1987, 1 year later, with War for the Oaks. And me loving this book as much as I did feels like such a triumph because I first attempted to read this book when I was like 15, got a few chapters in and gave up because it was boring. But this year I decided to give it another shot and now it's one of my 5-star favorites. So yes, that is the underdog success story I am looking for here. War for the Oaks follows Eddie, a girl who is in a rock and roll band. But the band is falling apart, she's just quit, she's just dumped her boyfriend, her life is a little bit in disarray. What comes in, of course, was something to throw it into even more chaos. Because the Fae, the fair folk in her area, are about to have a war, and they need to draft a mortal into their war to make some of their spells work. And so she has chosen to be part of the Fae war. Doesn't really want to, but there she goes. But most of this book isn't about that war. We do get some action battle scenes, but most of it, the time before and after and in between all of these little Fae skirmishes, most of the book is Eddie rebuilding her life that just fell apart in the beginning of the book in the context of having this potential death sentence of Fae magic hanging over her head. And the vibes, the feeling of this book is like perfectly mixing 1980s rock and roll and Celtic folk music, and you just put it in a blender and see what pops out in different scenes. But my favorite part of this book is the friendships, the romance, the relationships of it all, because the relationships in this book are so delicate and real and shippable. It's a story about rock music played and friends made along the way in the wake of a fairy war. I loved this book. I'm obsessed with this book. I highly recommend this book, of course. For our next book on this list, we are jumping forward in time 25 years to 2012. with the I Hunt Killers trilogy. These are the only books to make it onto this list that aren't sci-fi fantasy. They are young adult thriller novels. This series follows a teenage boy named Jazz, who did not have the most restful childhood. His father was a notoriously prolific, enthusiastic serial killer who often brought his son along to the killings and taught him all that he knows. But a few years ago, his father was caught, put into prison for life, and Jazz is trying to have the semblance of a normal life without his father looming over him, which is not quite possible. Book 1 can be read all by itself, it's pretty standalone, and then books 2 and 3 are kind of smushed together, you gotta read them back to back. Here's the premise of book 1. There is a new serial killer active in Jazz's hometown, and this killer seems to be copycatting Jazz's father. So Jazz has a lot of intellectual and emotional skin in the game of catching this serial killer. And so, despite the police not wanting him to get involved, he gets involved with the investigation and is trying his best to bring this killer to justice. Something that he ends up being really good at because he has been trained in the ways of thinking like a serial killer like no one else. And that is the crux of why I loved this book, is the psychology of Jazz. Because both nature and nurture is telling him that he should be a serial killer. He was born to be one, he was raised to be one, right? And if he wanted to, he could be really good at it, but he doesn't want to. He wants so hard just to be a normal person. But of course, with the social shadow of his father's legacy hanging over him, people are never treating him like a normal person. He cares so much about hunting down the serial killer because if he becomes someone who is using all of the serial killer knowledge to hunt killers instead of becoming one himself, then maybe he can finally prove to everyone that he's good. I loved these books. I'm obsessed with them. I highly recommend them, and I definitely want to pick up more psychological, character-focused thrillers like this in the future. Let me know if you have any recommendations. In fact, let me know your favorite books of the year! Like, I am looking for recommendations. Please tell me what books you loved. And now we go to number 7, a book from 2014. The Heartstrikers series, with the first book being Nice Dragons Finish Last. This is a series that is like half fantasy with dragons and stuff and half sci-fi with like a cyberpunk futuristic city setting. And our main character of this book is Julius, a teenage dragon going through his rebellious phase. The expectations of his family, his ferocious dragon mother, is that he be ferocious, is that he be draconic. He shouldn't have any respect for humans and he's gotta be able to be ruthless and mean and selfish. But Julius, our protagonist, just wants to be nice. He enjoys doing favors for people. He likes a quiet, gentle life. And for this crime, he is disowned and kicked out of the family. And so he is put out on the streets of this cyberpunk city with a determination to continue to be nice. And there he meets Marcy, a mage who is in trouble with the mob, and their problems quickly snowball until they are dealing with apocalypse-level threats together. And what can I say about these books? I loved them. On a storytelling level, pacing, characters, it's all fantastic. But where this book really shines, I feel like, is the themes. Where this book series is definitely trying to show the power of friendship, the power of kindness, and not in an entirely cheesy way, but in a way of characters actually leveraging the power of trust and teamwork. Where in amongst all of the twists and turns and prophecies and apocalypses happening, it's got this core that is so wholesome and fun. And there is also an adorable romance between Julius and Marcy, our two leads, wrapped up in it. I think of all the books on this list, these are the ones that I read most quickly, most obsessively, there are 5 books in this series, let's read them all in 3 days, kind of thing. Because they are so bingeable like that. Number 6, we are going to 2018 with the Hidden Legacy series. Now, the Hidden Legacy series has like a part 1 trilogy and a part 2 trilogy. And we're just talking about the part 2 trilogy around the character of Catalina. The part 1 trilogy is around her older sister, Nevada, and those do not make it onto my top books of 2022 list. But Catalina's books do. And these are urban fantasy / paranormal romance books where they really just straddle the line there of focusing more on the urban fantasy side of like doing investigations and fighting against evil bad guys and the romance part of romance. And what tripped me up about the first few books in the series was I didn't really dig the romance, but in these books with Catalina, I did in fact love the romance. So there we go. So the romance, check. What about the urban fantasy plot side? Also, Check. Catalina, our main character, is the head of her family's detective agency. And she keeps getting handed cases that she has to take that are more and more dangerous and magical and political. And she is desperately trying to juggle all of this while also juggling her own magical abilities, which keep getting stronger, which is a problem for her because her magical ability is to make people fall in love with her. Not magic that she enjoys using, not magic that she wants, but magic that she is stuck with. And we get some very sweet character development for Catalina as she comes to terms with her power and finds her girl boss inside of places where she can use her magic for good. I love these books. I'm obsessed with them and I very much hope that we get more in the series. I definitely recommend the Hidden Legacy series, with the caveat that you might love one of the trilogies better than the other. And now, number 5 from 2021, we are getting very close to the present day, is Winter Keep. Winter Keep is the 4th book of the Graceling series. And let me explain my relationship with the series a little bit. The first 3 books in the series came out like a decade ago, and I loved them. They are, to this day, some of my favorite books, and I keep rereading them and keep loving them. This is book 1, Graceling, and book 2, Fire. Whereas book 3, I decide to pretend like book 3 doesn't exist most of the time because I did not like it. My favorite books is books 1 and 2 of the series. Book 3, complete flop. I haven't reread this book since 2012, but I read that book in 2012 and I was disappointed. So now, just recently, we got book 4. But I'm just trying to convey to you that I went into this book with a big mess of conflicting expectations and hoping so hard that it would be a new favorite book. And it ended up on this list, so you know how that turned out. And Winter Keep follows 5 main perspectives. A huge otherworldly sea monster, a sentient telepathic fox, a teenager with politician parents starting to uncover all of the shady things that her parents are doing on a daily basis, the queen and her bodyguard. So this queen and bodyguard decide to visit a far-off land, which is the land where this book takes place, and where our teenage protagonist and her fox and the sea monster live. And this is a book about all of their plots intermingling and getting all tangled up in the crazy political mess that is happening here. One of the things that impressed me most about this book is how well it juggled all of our perspectives. I was invested in every single one of their plots. It gave me stakes. It gave me things that I didn't want the characters to lose. It gave me things that I wanted the characters to gain. It helped me care about every single one of them. It is just a solid fantasy adventure book with a nice helping of romance on the side. I am freshly obsessed with the series. I think I want to reread the first 3 books and read book 5, which came out recently. Now, we do have 4 books that came out in 2022, but before we get to those, I want to give some honorable mentions. These are books that I gave 5 stars to, but then I went and read more books in the series, and I didn't love the other books in the series quite as much. And so I don't feel like I can put the whole series on the best books of 2022 list, but they certainly deserve a little mention. We have The Warded Man, Rules of Redemption, and The Observer Effect. Okay, book number 4 came out on March 8th, A Far Wilder Magic. This is a book that takes place in a fantasy world that vaguely resembles northeastern 1910s United States. And we have 2 protagonists. Margaret lives alone in a secluded mansion. Her mother is a famous alchemist that is always traveling the world on business and leaving her daughter sadly neglected. And then our other protagonist, Wes, is a young man looking to study alchemy. He needs an apprenticeship and he has been kicked out of every single other apprenticeship he's ever tried for inadequate scholarship skills. So he comes to Margaret's family mansion in order to beg for an apprenticeship, and of course, the mother is not home. But he ends up talking his way into staying there until the mom gets home anyway. The town that is next to this mansion is hosting a magical competition to hunt down this demon fox ghost thing. And Margaret and Wes, for their own reasons, decide to enter together as a 2-person team. And this book has them wrestling with their feelings of inadequacy and also learning how to open up to another person as they fall in love. Oh, the romance here is the star of the show. The competition to kill the demon fox thing is certainly interesting, but it's not the focus here. The focus here is this character development and these 2 people growing closer together. While I was reading this book, I just had such a feeling of contentment. Every time we would switch off a chapter from Wes to Margaret and vice versa, being able to see both of their emotional journeys and them reacting to each other. And it was just so well balanced and well done and gave me such a homey and hopeful feel. And wow, there are so many books on this top list that are here, in part because I love the romance. I just need to find some good old straight up romance novels to read. And so far I have not been able to find a 5-star with them. Please give me recommendations for romance I would love. I loved A Far Wilder Magic. I'm obsessed with it and I'm very excited for what this author writes next. Next up on this list, we have a book from April 19th, which is The Rarkin's Familiar. This is a multi-POV epic fantasy novel, and wow, does it nail the epicness. There are so many new creatures and cultures and types of magic that are all just kind of touched upon, and not in an overwhelming, you have to remember all of these details way, but just in a, this world feels very rich and lived in, and I'm excited to see more of it kind of way. The plot of this book is that we have Liz, angry and traumatized young woman whose father was murdered in front of her, and she's made it her life's mission to hunt down her father's killer, and is training in the sword and in magic in order to accomplish this. But her plans are quickly sidetracked when she meets 𝐂𝐿, a birdman, aka a Rarkin. And through a series of peculiar events, they accidentally form a blood pact with each other, so they cannot physically separate too far from each other, and they also have a telepathic mind link. Oops! And so Liz and 𝐂𝐿, who has his own baggage and trust issues after being kept captive by a wizard for like 6 years, and then just recently set free only to be forced into a pact with another human, go on a quest together to try to find someone who knows how to undo this blood pact between them. And to me, the star of the show here is the friendship between our two leads. They start out enemies, hating each other, not understanding each other, and then as they're traveling together, they get to know each other and become strong friends and allies. And what more character and relationship development could you wish for? This is a story about learning to trust strangers, people that seem odd to you and are vastly different from you, and also a book about when you should really not trust strangers because it will derail your whole quest and cause infinite troubles in your lives. I am obsessed with this book. I love it. I just reread it like last week and it was even better on a reread. I highly recommend this novel. Counting down to book number 2, we have a book that was released on July 5th. The Law, which was book 17 and a half in the Dresden Files series, a little bonus novella. And honestly, this is the book that I'm most conflicted about putting on the best books of 2022 list, because the farther I get from it, the less I like it, the less fondly I can look back on it. But I read this book twice, and both times I gave it 5 stars and maintained that rating, so it has undoubtedly earned its spot on this list. So why did I both love this book and find it pretty underwhelming? I am already obsessed with the Dresden Files. Any book that came out would already get the bonus points of just being part of this story I am already in love with. But in comparison to the rest of the series, this novella falls flat, is lacking. Because it's a fun and interesting little low-stakes story that provides a really interesting contrast between this book and the beginning of the series. But is there any character development in this novella? It feels kind of skippable and unnecessary. Obviously, this is of the lower tier, but I gave it 5 stars. It deserves the spot. If you are obsessed with the Dresden Files, I recommend it. Okay, then we have the most recent release of November 1st, Holmes Coming. This, along with a few other books on this list, are self-published indie books, so I'm very happy to be talking about so many of them, because those books do not have the marketing department of a major publisher behind them. Now, Holmes Coming is a modern-day Sherlock Holmes story, and I have loved many a modern-day Sherlock Holmes story. I think it's a character that is particularly easy to adapt into a modern setting, because we still have quirky, standoffish detectives and their gaggle of friends in our pop culture canon to this day. But here is what sets this book apart from all of the other modern day Sherlock Holmes adaptations and reimaginings that I've seen. The Sherlock Holmes in this book is the Sherlock Holmes from the 1800s. In like the 1890s, Sherlock got bored. He was like, I've solved all the big crimes here, there's nothing more for me, and he froze himself in like a little cryo chamber until getting woken up modern day, where he is so pitiful and gets taken in by our narrator, Dr. Amy Winslow, who is of course the Watson of the story. And Sherlock is pretty much immediately like, ooh, let's go find an unusual murder. Someone was mauled to death by a tiger a few days ago. Yeah, I'm on the case. Let's find a new nemesis. And our protagonist, Dr. Amy Winslow, is like, could you slow down, please? And the gem at the center of this book is Sherlock Holmes trying to adapt to modern life. And it's not just like goofy, he doesn't know what a cell phone is. Sherlock, back in time, was always the smartest man in the room, was always the best detective. Take him into a modern context, and he is the most ignorant man in the room. And he has also lost his detective edge to this newfangled CSI, science lab something. We don't need a Sherlock Holmes solving our mysteries anymore, and Sherlock has to come to terms with his plan going terribly awry that he had so much hope for, that he was going to find new awesome mysteries and help the future that would desperately need him, and then he isn't needed anymore. I am obsessed with this book, and I am very excited for the, hopefully, sequel that we'll get one day. Okay, so now, the big question, what is my favorite book of the year? And the award goes to the 𝐂𝐻𝐶𝐂𝐂𝐐 saga. And at first I double questioned my own decision. Like, Chloe, isn't that just recency bias because that's the one you've read most recently out of any of these? And the answer is no, it's not just recency bias, because I not only read these books and gave them 5 stars, I've also reread like 6 of them already, which is not something that I have done with like any other book on this list. I have reread them, but not so quickly, so immediately, so obsessively, because these books are truly my favorite. Of the books in the series I've read so far, my top book, the top book of 2022 is Memory. This is the book that does the most work towards that shifting in genre that I talked about before, that shifting in genre that is following character development. This book is chock full of experiences that are really challenging our protagonist, forcing him to contort himself in ways he never thought possible in order to solve new, interesting problems, and becoming a truly different person because of it. And it is such a rich and emotional and thoughtful story that is so well paced and well plotted, and I love it. So those are my top books of 2022. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you shout out to my patrons. Let me know in the comments, what are your best books of 2022? I am always looking for recommendations, but most of all recommendations from the books that you were obsessed with, please.